Liam stood on the 7th-floor hospital rooftop, the wind a raw whisper around him. He contemplated the finality that awaited him just beyond the edge. His hospital gown fluttered violently. From this height, life below seemed insignificant, the people like ants scurrying across the hospital courtyard. He wondered if the fall would hurt, whether it would be a quick release. He shifted forward, his toes hovering over the void. A voice from behind him startled Liam, suggesting the fall would be both painful and grotesque. He spun around to see a young man, similarly clad in a striped hospital gown, leaning casually against the doorway. Sunlight framed the man's silhouette as he held a worn sketchbook. Liam, his voice raw, told him to leave. Instead, the man approached, introducing himself as Caleb. He was 23, battling stage 4 lymphoma, and pointed to his wristband, identical to Liam's. He asked Liam his name. Liam, irritated, retorted that it was none of his business, moving closer to the precipice. Caleb, however, had already seen Liam's name tag. He calmly mentioned Liam's diagnosis: acute myeloid leukemia, adding that he had heard chemotherapy was agonizing. Liam scoffed, stating that if death was inevitable, he preferred to choose his own way out. Caleb's bright, almost blinding smile suggested he felt the same. He joined Liam at the edge, looking down. Caleb proposed that jumping alone felt too isolating, suggesting they go together. Liam, taken aback, turned to stare. Caleb's profile in the sunlight was almost translucent, revealing the faint blue veins beneath his skin. Liam questioned his seriousness. Caleb shrugged, remarking that doctors had given him 6 months at most, and he'd rather not waste it being ravaged by illness. Before he could finish, Caleb suddenly gripped Liam's hand, declaring they would count to 3 and jump. Liam's heart pounded against his ribs. Caleb's palm was unexpectedly warm, a stark contrast to Liam's own cold skin. Caleb began the countdown, his voice light, like a child playing a game. Liam tried to pull away, but Caleb's grip tightened. As Caleb turned to face him, his eyes filled with sunlight, Liam desperately tried to pry his fingers open. Caleb, surprisingly strong, held fast. At the count of 3, Caleb didn't jump. Instead, he exerted a powerful tug, yanking Liam back from the edge of the rooftop. They collapsed together onto the rough concrete. Liam's back hit Caleb's chest, and a low grunt escaped Caleb. He then leaned close to Liam's ear, his breath warm on Liam's neck, remarking that Liam clearly didn't want to die. Liam trembled, unsure if it was from anger or lingering fear. Caleb released him, slowly stood up, and brushed dust from his gown. He offered Liam his tattered sketchbook, as if nothing unusual had just occurred. Liam glared at him but eventually took the book. Opening the sketchbook, Liam held his breath. Inside were vivid scenes from the hospital: a nurse dozing in the hallway, an elderly patient sunbathing in the garden, a glimpse of the sky from a ward window. Each drawing pulsated with an extraordinary sense of life, as if the antiseptic scent of the hospital could emanate from the pages. Liam quietly asked if Caleb had drawn them all. Caleb affirmed it, explaining that since learning of his impending death, everything had seemed remarkably beautiful. He sat beside Liam and pointed to a page, identifying a doctor who secretly brought candy for child patients during rounds. Liam continued to turn the pages, stopping abruptly at a drawing of himself, propped up in bed with a book, eyes closed, sunlight filtering through the curtains onto his face. Liam, curious, inquired about the drawing's origin. Caleb's voice softened, as if fearing the moment might vanish, saying he drew it 3 days prior while Liam was asleep. Remarking on Liam's peaceful appearance, like someone who might disappear at any moment, Liam abruptly closed the sketchbook and handed it back, asking why Caleb concerned himself with him. Caleb looked into the distance, sunlight dancing on his eyelashes, before quietly stating that he found himself unconsciously looking at Liam's bed during morning rounds, and he imagined he would be very lonely if Liam were not there. Liam's heart skipped a beat. Caleb stood up and extended his hand to Liam, saying it was lunchtime and he heard there was pudding. Liam hesitated before taking Caleb's hand. His palm was warm and dry, reminding Liam of walking with his father as a child. From that day on, Caleb became Liam's constant companion. He somehow convinced Nurse Miller to move him into Liam's room. One night, Liam, disturbed by Caleb's muttering, complained about his bothersome presence. Caleb responded in the dark, his voice inexplicably hoarse, that he knew, but added that Liam was no longer thinking of jumping from the roof. Was he? Liam had no reply. The next day, during Liam's chemotherapy, Caleb insisted on dragging his 4-pole next to Liam's bed. When the searing pain of the medication caused Liam to curl up, Caleb took his hand, looking at him intently. He gently urged Liam not to let the pain control him, to think of something else, like his favorite place. Liam, gritting his teeth, murmured the ocean. Caleb's voice became soft yet firm, instructing Liam to imagine they were there, asking if he could hear the waves, smell the salty air. Liam closed his eyes, letting Caleb's words transport him from the sterile hospital room. Miraculously, the pain seemed to lessen. After the treatment, Liam lay exhausted. Caleb sketched by the window, the sunlight making his thin earlobe glow like a small lantern. Liam asked why Caleb was so kind to him. Caleb's pencil paused. He looked up, his gaze so tender it made Liam's heart tremble, stating that Liam deserved to be treated well, even if life had only one day left. That night, Liam secretly looked through Caleb's sketchbook. On the last page, he found an unfinished drawing. 2 boys holding hands on a beach, waves washing over their ankles. In a corner, tiny script read, "Places I want to go with you." Liam's eyes welled up, filled more with confusion than sorrow. How could someone show such profound kindness after only knowing him for a few days? A week later, Liam was awakened in the dead of night by a violent coughing fit. Caleb's bed was empty. The bathroom light was on. Liam found him kneeling on the floor, the sink stained with blood. Liam rushed to support Caleb's swaying body. Caleb tried to smile, but more blood spilled from his lips. He stammered that he was just tired. Liam pressed the emergency call button. Medical staff arrived quickly. As Caleb was wheeled out, he tightly gripped Liam's hand, gasping, telling him not to be afraid, reminding Liam he had promised to take him to the beach. Liam stood in the hallway, watching the emergency room light, realizing with a terrifying clarity that he could not lose Caleb. 3 hours later, Dr. Evans informed Liam that Caleb was temporarily out of danger. Liam sat by Caleb's bedside, observing his pale face and slightly furrowed brow. For the first time, he allowed himself to admit that he had fallen in love with the boy who had pulled him back from the 7th-floor rooftop. As the morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, Caleb opened his eyes. He smiled weakly at Liam upon seeing him, asking if he had been there all night. Liam nodded, his throat tight, his vision blurring. Caleb slowly raised a hand to Liam's face, gently asking if he was crying. Liam realized his tears had already dampened the bedsheets. He took Caleb's hand and pressed it to his cheek, sobbing, pleading with him not to leave. Caleb's thumb gently brushed away Liam's tears, softly promising that he wouldn't go, at least not before they saw the ocean. After that, they often shared a hospital bed, looking through Caleb's sketchbook and planning their future trips once they recovered. Caleb loved to draw, Liam loved to write. They vowed to create a book together about 2 terminally ill boys traveling the world. Caleb, his head resting on Liam's shoulder, said their first stop would be Liam's favorite beach. He envisioned them running barefoot on the sand, chased by the waves. Liam, breathing in Caleb's faint scent, asked what then. Caleb closed his eyes, his voice fading, listing snow-capped mountains, deserts, and all beautiful places. Liam gently held Caleb's thinning shoulders, feeling his steady breath. Outside, the setting sun painted the clouds a golden red, mirroring the colors in Caleb's drawings. Neither of them spoke of the obvious reality. Their time was running out. But in that moment, In the sterile hospital room, wrapped in each other's embrace, they found the courage to face death. Perhaps this was love at life's end. Not grand declarations, but intertwined hands each morning, gentle encouragement during pain, and the bravery to choose love despite knowing there was no future. Caleb had once asked Liam if he believed in an afterlife. Liam had said no, but now he wished it were true, so he could meet the boy who taught him how to live again on a sunny beach. When Caleb's condition stabilized, Dr. Evans allowed him a brief leave from the room. That afternoon, Caleb wheeled himself mysteriously to Liam's bed, a mischievous glint in his eyes. He shook a wheelchair borrowed from the nurse's station and a somewhat rusty key, telling Liam he was taking him somewhere. Liam, fearing discovery, remarked on Caleb's madness. Caleb, crouching to help Liam into his slippers, his hair swirling softly in the sunlight, said that was precisely what made it exciting. He urged Liam to hurry before Dr. Evans returned from his meeting. Caleb's fingers brushed Liam's ankle like a feather, and Liam suppressed an unusual flutter in his chest, letting Caleb assist him into the wheelchair. Caleb pushed him down a long corridor, turning into an unfamiliar, unusually quiet section of the hospital. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting dappled patterns on the floor. Caleb explained this was the old inpatient ward, scheduled for demolition, a place he had stumbled upon during a checkup last month. He stopped at a rusty iron door, pulling out the key he'd acquired from Mr. Henderson in maintenance in exchange for 3 portraits. After a struggle with the old lock, the door finally yielded. Beyond it lay a small rooftop, much smaller than where they first met, but offering an excellent view of the city skyline and the hospital garden below, where children in hospital gowns chased each other on the lawn. Caleb knelt beside Liam, his eyes bright, asking what he thought. Liam, meaning Caleb rather than the scenery, softly said it was beautiful. Caleb smiled, standing to retrieve his sketchbook and a thermos from a bag on the wheelchair. He winked, proudly admitting he'd snuck in 2 hot chocolates since Nurse Miller had forbidden Liam cold drinks. As the lid came off, the sweet aroma filled the air. Caleb sat cross-legged on the ground and began to draw. Liam watched the city outline emerge under his pencil, feeling a momentary illusion that they were just 2 ordinary young men, not patients counting down their lives. Liam couldn't help but ask Caleb if he was afraid. Caleb's pencil paused before his voice reached Liam's ears, admitting his fear, especially when he woke up in the middle of the night wondering if these were truly his last few months. He took a sip of hot chocolate, a bit clinging to his lip, then added that he had found that fear lessened when he remembered he wasn't alone. Liam's heart raced as he eagerly asked, "Like who?" Caleb tilted his head, wiping the chocolate from Liam's lip, saying Liam knew perfectly well. His finger lingered for a second before he nonchalantly resumed drawing. Liam's face flushed, and he quickly lowered his head to drink his hot chocolate, though the sweet liquid couldn't mask the sweetness blossoming in his heart. The rooftop became their secret sanctuary. Whenever Caleb felt well, they would sneak up there. He would draw, and Liam would read or simply watch the clouds. Sometimes, Caleb would hum a tuneless melody that drifted on the wind, becoming Liam's favorite sound. On the 3rd Thursday of May, Caleb developed a sudden high fever. Liam stayed by his bedside, watching Caleb's sweat-drenched eyelashes tremble, his chest tight with an invisible grip. Caleb murmured Liam's name in his sleep, his fingers unconsciously clutching the sheets. Liam held his hand, softly responding that he was there. At 3 a.m., Caleb's fever finally broke. He weakly opened his eyes, momentarily startled to see Liam still awake. Liam shook his head and wiped the sweat from Caleb's forehead with a damp cloth. Caleb suddenly gripped Liam's wrist with surprising strength. Liam asked what was wrong, if he was in pain. Caleb's voice was hoarse and urgent, saying that if he left first, Liam had to promise him something. Liam's heart clenched, urging him not to talk nonsense. Caleb looked at Liam with stubborn insistence, asking him to promise to continue their story, to see the ocean for him, to live well for him. Liam's vision blurred, his throat choked, unable to speak. Caleb's hand stroked Liam's face, gently wiping away his tears. Liam, choking back sobs, promised, but made Caleb promise not to give up easily. Caleb smiled, a weak but tender smile, and suggested they pinky swear. As their pinkies intertwined, Liam understood the bittersweet pain. Despite knowing the hope was slim, he couldn't help but wish for a miracle. The next day, Caleb was uncharacteristically well. He even sat up to draw, proudly showing Liam his latest creation, a sparrow on the hospital windowsill. Caleb, eyes sparkling, said the sparrow had visited him that morning and he had shared some breadcrumbs with it. Liam, looking at the lifelike bird, made a sudden decision. He retrieved an old diary, a 12th birthday gift from his parents, which he had never brought himself to use. Opening it, he wrote the title Hot Chocolate on the rooftop. Caleb leaned over curiously, his breath warm against Liam's ear, asking if it was their story. Liam, afraid Caleb would see his flushed face, didn't turn. He explained that Caleb would draw and he would write. Caleb was silent for a moment before gently leaning his head on Liam's shoulder, his voice soft as a feather, agreeing that this way, even if they were gone one day, their story would live on. That night, while Caleb slept, Liam secretly wrote. Today Caleb's hand was warm. The little bird he drew looks like it could fly off the page any moment. If I only have 1 month left, I wish every day could be like this. With sunlight, his smile, and the story flowing from my pen, alongside his art. In early June, Liam's condition suddenly worsened. Continuous high fevers and intense bone pain left him barely conscious. In a haze, he felt someone holding his hand, a voice reaching him from a distance, urging him to look. He struggled to focus, seeing Caleb's pale face streaked with tears. In that moment, Liam felt a profound regret. Regret for not meeting him sooner, for wasting so much time they could have spent loving each other. He struggled to lift his hand, wiping away Caleb's tears, promising not to give up easily. Caleb buried his face in Liam's palm, and Liam felt the warm liquid of his tears. The treatment lasted a full week. When Liam could finally sit up, he noticed Caleb looked significantly thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. Liam, concerned, asked if Caleb hadn't rested well. Caleb shook his head, pulling an envelope from under his pillow, saying it was for Liam. The envelope contained a stack of drawings, each one of Liam. Liam sleeping, Liam reading, Liam staring out the window. The last drawing showed their backs on the rooftop, with the date and their initials in the corner. Caleb quietly confessed that he had been afraid Liam would disappear if he closed his eyes, so he had drawn constantly, as if that could keep him there. Liam's heart ached, clutched by a gentle hand. He took Caleb's hand, wrote LY in his palm, and closed his fingers around it, softly saying that this way, he would always be in Caleb's hand. Caleb's eyes lit up. He leaned forward and hugged Liam, carefully avoiding the 4 lines. Caleb's heartbeat, fast and strong, pulsed through his thin hospital gown. He whispered in Liam's ear, "I love you." Those 3 words, light as a feather, felt overwhelmingly heavy. Liam hugged him tightly, afraid he would vanish if he let go, acknowledging that he loved Caleb far more than he had imagined. They exchanged their deepest secrets, yet never quite breached the unspoken barrier between them. After that day, their bond deepened. Caleb often squeezed into Liam's bed, resting his head on Liam's shoulder to draw. Liam would hold Caleb's hand as he fell asleep at night, preventing nightmares. They were like 2 travelers in a snowstorm, drawing warmth from each other. In mid-June, Caleb's condition rapidly and severely deteriorated again. Doctors bustled around his bed late into the night. Liam, isolated in his own bed, could only glimpse Caleb's pale face through the curtain. When the commotion finally subsided, Caleb was wearing an oxygen mask. He weakly reached out to Liam. Liam immediately gripped his hand, feeling the faint pressure of his fingertips. Caleb's muffled voice, distorted by the mask, told him not to worry, reminding him he hadn't yet taken Liam to the ocean. Liam, fighting back tears, kissed the back of Caleb's hand, telling him he was waiting and to get well soon. Caleb nodded, closing his eyes. Liam stayed by his side until the nurse finally made him return to his own bed. The next morning, Liam was awakened by urgent alarms. Medical staff surrounded Caleb's bed, the piercing beeps of machines filling the room. Liam struggled to get up but was stopped by a nurse, who urged him not to approach. Liam's voice rose sharply with fear, asking what was happening to Caleb. No one answered, as they were all focused on Caleb. Liam couldn't see him, only hearing the doctor's urgent commands and the cold, rhythmic beeping of the machines. Time seemed to stop. Liam stood frozen, his nails digging into his palms, feeling no pain. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Evans turned. His expression made Liam's heart sink. He explained they had stabilized Caleb's condition for now, but then, removing his mask, he told Liam to prepare himself. The world went silent for Liam. He nodded mechanically, walking to Caleb's bedside. Caleb lay still, his chest rising and falling faintly, like a feather poised to float away. Liam gently took his hand, pressing it to his cheek. Liam whispered Caleb's name, reminding him of their promise to see the ocean. A tear fell onto the bedsheet, indistinguishable as his or Caleb's. On the third day of Caleb's transfer to intensive care, Dr. Evans called Liam into his office. Rain streaked the window pane like transparent tears. Dr. Evans, removing his glasses and wearily rubbing his eyes, explained that Caleb's lymphoma had spread to his lungs. Liam stared at Caleb's CT scans on the desk. The shadowy images were like ugly spiderwebs consuming his young lungs. Liam's voice was dry as he asked how much time Caleb had left. Dr. Evans gently placed a hand on Liam's shoulder, saying that with continued treatment, perhaps 2 or 3 weeks. Without it, possibly 1 week. The room spun around Liam, and he clung desperately to the chair arms. He asked if Caleb knew. Dr. Evans nodded, stating Caleb had requested a day pass. Liam looked up sharply, his vision blurred by tears. Dr. Evans, offering Liam a tissue, his voice softening, explained that Caleb wanted to take Liam to the ocean. He and Nurse Miller had discussed it. As soon as Caleb's condition was stable enough, an ambulance would take them. Back in his room, Liam mechanically opened their notebook. Caleb's most recent drawing was of the ocean, with 2 chairs side by side on the beach, marked with LY and LC. Liam's tears splattered onto the page, blurring the pencil lines. That night, Liam dreamed of the ocean. Caleb stood in the shallow water, sunlight passing through his translucent body, waves washing over his ankles without carrying away a single grain of sand. He smiled at Liam, his lips moving silently. Liam woke, his pillow soaked. Outside, darkness still clung to the sky, occasionally broken by the soft footsteps of nurses in the corridor. The next morning, a nurse informed Liam that Caleb was awake and wanted to see him. The intensive care unit lights were always too bright, making Caleb's face appear even paler. Tubes and wires extended from his body, connecting him to the rhythmic sounds of machines. Seeing Liam, Caleb weakly moved a finger. Liam carefully took his hand, afraid of dislodging a tube. Caleb's hand was cold, and a small bruise marked the area around his fore. Caleb's voice was faint, like a wisp of wind, asking if Liam wanted to hear a joke. Liam nodded, his throat tight. Caleb, panting slightly, asked what kind of fish was the smartest. Liam shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. Caleb, with a weak smile, said a tuna, because it had both gills and brains, a play on words in Chinese for muscle and brain. A coughing fit immediately interrupted him. Liam quickly helped him up, feeling Caleb's bony shoulder blades through his gown. After the coughing subsided, Caleb leaned against Liam, his breathing shallow and rapid. Liam gently stroked Caleb's damp hair, telling him Dr. Evans had shared the beach plan. Caleb nodded faintly, his eyelashes brushing Liam's neck, confessing he had wanted to go for a long time. Liam, concerned about Caleb's current condition, started to protest. Caleb interrupted him, his voice suddenly clearer, saying he would rather live one day at the ocean than lie in this room for another week. His eyes, enlarged in his gaunt face, held an appeal Liam couldn't refuse. Liam kissed his forehead, tasting salty sweat. Softly, he promised they would go to the ocean. Over the next 3 days, Caleb's condition miraculously stabilized slightly. The doctors convened and eventually agreed to allow them 8 hours outside, under strict medical supervision. The evening before their departure, Liam sat by Caleb's bed, organizing their things. Caleb was surprisingly energetic, even sitting up to help Liam check the list. He asked if Liam had packed the camera, his voice stronger than days before. Liam confirmed it, then asked about the sketchbook and colored pencils. Caleb smiled and nodded, then suddenly coughed, quickly turning his face away. But Liam still saw the startling red on his handkerchief. After Caleb calmed, Liam silently took the handkerchief and tucked it into his pocket. Caleb then gripped Liam's wrist, asking that if he looked unwell the next day, Liam shouldn't show it, as he didn't want to be sent back. Liam's heart clenched, but he agreed. Caleb relaxed, leaning back against the pillow. Amidst the regular beeping of the monitor, he suddenly asked Liam to read a passage from his story. Liam opened his notebook to the latest entry. He sometimes wondered where he would be if he hadn't met Caleb that day, perhaps a forgotten wisp of wind. It was Caleb who taught him to look up at the stars, even in the deepest night. Liam's voice caught. Caleb's hand covered his, squeezing gently, urging him to continue. Liam took a deep breath, explaining that the stars would tell him darkness wasn't eternal. Just as Caleb's smile had taught him that the meaning of life wasn't its length but whether someone was willing to share every second of joy and sorrow. Caleb's eyes glittered in the dim bedside lamp. He softly remarked how well it was written and made Liam promise to finish it. Liam squeezed Caleb's hand tightly, unable to speak. The next morning, the sun was unusually bright. Nurse Miller personally helped Caleb into civilian clothes, a light blue shirt that hung loosely on his emaciated frame. Liam stood by, watching him smile as the nurses bustled around, his chest aching. The ambulance was equipped with basic medical supplies and Dr. Evans and a nurse accompanied them. Caleb was carefully settled into a wheelchair. Liam sat beside him, holding his needle-pricked hand. Dr. Evans asked if they were ready. Caleb nodded, his eyes bright as stars. As the vehicle started, he leaned his head on Liam's shoulder and softly whispered if it felt like an elopement. Liam smiled, kissing the top of his head, inhaling Caleb's faint medicinal scent. 2 hours later, they finally saw the ocean. It was a small cove, with white sand shimmering under the sun and gentle blue waves lapping the shore. Being off the tourist path, it was almost deserted. The medical staff set up a parasol on the beach, along with portable oxygen and medications. Caleb insisted on standing from his wheelchair. Liam supported him, feeling his body tremble. Step by step, they slowly made their way to the water's edge. Caleb's breathing grew more rapid, but he stubbornly shook his head, refusing to turn back, gritting his teeth and urging them to get just a little closer. Finally, the waves touched their toes. Caleb stopped, taking a deep breath of the salty air. His voice weak, he asked Liam if he saw it, looking out at the horizon where the sea met the sky, saying it was even more beautiful than he had imagined. Liam, looking at Caleb's profile, gilded by the sun, nodded, agreeing it was beautiful. They stood for a while, until Caleb's legs began to shake. Liam helped him back to the wheelchair. The nurse immediately checked his vitals, quietly informing Liam that he was stable, but not to stay too long. Liam pushed Caleb slowly along the beach, the medical team discreetly keeping their distance. Caleb's hand rested on Liam's the entire time, his fingertips cold. Caleb suddenly asked Liam to get his sketchbook. Liam stopped and handed him the book and pencils. Caleb's hand trembled slightly, but he drew with focused intensity. A few minutes later, he pushed the sketchbook towards Liam. The The drawing showed their long silhouettes on the sand, the wheelchair barely visible, like two ordinary boys standing side by side. He asked if Liam liked it. Liam nodded, his throat tight. Caleb tore out the page, folded it, and placed it in Liam's breast pocket, softly telling him to keep it and look at it when he missed him. Liam's voice broke. Caleb looked up, the sea breeze ruffling his hair, sunlight filling his eyes, turning them a transparent amber. In that moment, he was heartbreakingly beautiful. He reached out to wipe Liam's tears, telling him not to cry, reminding him to be happy today. Liam knelt, meeting Caleb's gaze, placing Caleb's hand on his own face, forcing a smile, stating that he was very happy. Every day he spent with Caleb made him happy. Caleb smiled, a smile brighter than the sun. He leaned forward and gently kissed Liam's lips. It was a salty kiss, a mixture of tears, sea breeze, and medicine. He whispered Liam's name, saying he loved him, his forehead resting against Liam's. Liam, choking up, replied that he loved him too, always. They stayed at the beach for 4 hours. Caleb drew 3 sketches. Liam wrote 5 pages. They shared sandwiches Nurse Miller had secretly prepared. Caleb only ate half a piece before he was full. Most of the time, they just quietly watched the ocean, listened to the waves, their fingers intertwined. Before heading back, the sunset painted the sea gold. Caleb was very tired, but insisted on watching the sunset a little longer. In the dimming light, he softly asked Liam to promise that no matter what happened, he would continue their story. Liam hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of Caleb's fragile body in his arms, and promised. On the way back to the hospital, Caleb slept on Liam's shoulder. His breathing was shallow, his brow slightly furrowed, as if in an unpleasant dream. Liam carefully held him, afraid a bump would shatter him. That night, back in the ward, Caleb's temperature began to rise. Doctors worked late into the night, eventually controlling the infection, but his condition was clearly weaker. Dr. Evans asked Liam in the hallway if it was worth it. Liam looked at the sleeping Caleb in the room and nodded, saying it was. A week later, hot chocolate on the 7th floor rooftop reached its final chapter. Caleb found it difficult to sit up, but he insisted on drawing the final illustrations himself. Liam supported him, Caleb's back against his chest, guiding his trembling fingers. After the drawing was complete, Caleb collapsed back onto his pillow, exhausted but his eyes bright. He asked Liam to read the last passage. Liam opened the notebook to the final page. Some people were like shooting stars, briefly streaking across one's life, yet leaving an eternal glow. Caleb was Liam's shooting star, his light. Even if his light one day faded, Liam knew that by looking up at the stars, Caleb would still be there. In his memories, in his words, in the space between every heartbeat. Caleb smiled and closed his eyes, a tear sliding from the corner. He softly murmured perfect. That night, the beeping of the monitor shattered the silence. Liam abruptly awoke from his bedside chair, seeing medical staff clustered around Caleb's bed. Caleb's breathing was extremely shallow, his face almost translucent in the bluish-white light. Dr. Evans saw Liam and waved him over. Caleb's hand was cold as marble. Liam gripped it tightly, as if to transfer his own life force to him. Liam leaned close to Caleb's ear, saying he was there and not to be afraid. Caleb's eyelids fluttered a few times, slowly opening. Seeing Liam, he weakly curved his lips, his mouth silently forming words. Liam recognized the shape. Ocean. Liam nodded. Yes, we went to the ocean, remember? Tears fell onto Caleb's face. It was beautiful, just as you said. Caleb's gaze slowly diffused, but his hand suddenly squeezed Liam's, a pressure light as a feather. The lines on the monitor flattened. Liam, his voice broken, whispered against Caleb's ear, "I love you. Always love you." Caleb's pupils dilated, reflecting the hospital room lights like two tiny stars' capes. Then, slowly, the light faded. The monitor emitted a harsh, continuous tone. Someone gently tried to pull Liam away, but he clung to Caleb's hand. Finally, Dr. Evans's words made him release his lover's hand. He asked Liam to give Caleb some dignity. Liam slid down the cold hallway wall, hugging his knees, trembling silently. The hallway lights were too bright, stinging his eyes. Something hard pressed against him in his pocket. It was Caleb's last drawing. He pulled it out, looking at the two figures standing side by side on the paper, suddenly understanding what heartbreak felt like. It wasn't a sudden crash, but a long, silent tearing process, starting from the chest, spreading to every inch of skin, until one became a desolate wasteland. The funeral took place on a rainy day. Caleb's parents, two silent elderly people, allowed Liam to attend their son's funeral as his partner. Liam stood before the gravestone, looking at the photo they had chosen for each other. Beneath it were only Caleb's name and dates, and a small line that read, "He taught us how to love life." Liam didn't cry. His tears seemed to have dried up the day Caleb left. Returning to the hospital, Liam found he had been moved to a private room. Caleb's bed was empty, neatly made, as if no one had ever lain there. Liam walked past that room countless times, feigning indifference, until late at night, when moonlight streamed through the curtains onto the empty bed. He finally allowed himself to break down. He curled up in the spot where Caleb had once lay, burying his face in the pillow, searching for Caleb's lingering scent. But there was only the smell of disinfectant. The next morning, Nurse Miller brought a cardboard box. Her eyes red. She softly said Caleb had asked her to give it to Liam after he left. Inside the box were all of Caleb's sketchbooks. On top lay a letter. Liam's hands trembled as he opened it. "Dear Liam, if you're reading this, it means I've become a star. Don't be sad. Stars are close to the moon, so I can see you every night. Promise me 3 things. 1. Complete our bucket list. I secretly added a few more items. 2. Smile at least once a day. 3. Keep writing. Your words are beautiful. Remember that day at the beach? It was the happiest day of my life. Thank you for that gift. I will always love you, from the starry sky to the bottom of the sea. You're Caleb." The letter was damp with Liam's tears. He carefully wiped them dry, refolded it, and placed it back in the envelope. He opened the top sketchbook, finding a photograph tucked inside. A picture of them together at the beach taken by Nurse Miller. In the photo, Caleb smiled so brightly, sunlight dancing in his hair. Liam's arm was around his shoulder. They looked like any healthy, loving couple. Liam taped the photo to his bedside and took out his notebook. On a new page, he wrote, "Dear Caleb, the sun is beautiful today. I guess you arranged it. I will complete every item on the list, including that ridiculous one about eating every flavor of ice cream. You know I'm lactose intolerant. Sometimes I forget you're gone, especially when half asleep in the morning, and I turn to call you to look at the clouds outside. Then I remember you live in those clouds. I'm doing well, just missing you very much. Always yours, Liam." After writing, he looked out the window. Sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting a golden glow on the windowsill. The wind gently stirred the curtains, like a soft touch. He knew it wasn't goodbye, just a long farewell. 37 days after Caleb's passing, Liam finally summoned the courage to open the bucket list Caleb had left him. The paper had yellowed slightly, with Caleb's usual star doodles on the edges. The last few additions were in slightly hurried handwriting, presumably written in his final days. 7. Drink hot cocoa on a real snow-capped mountain. 8. Publish our book. 9. Help someone like us. 10. Live well for me. Liam's finger traced an indentation under the 10th item, as if the pen had pressed hard against the paper. Outside, a light rain fell, tracing transparent tear-like paths on the window pane. The next day, Liam was discharged. Dr. Evans said his condition allowed him to leave the hospital temporarily, provided he returned for regular checkups. His backpack held all of Caleb's sketchbooks and their story. Liam embarked on the journey to complete the list. The first stop was a snow-capped mountain. Caleb had always wanted to see real snow, but their health had never allowed it. As the cable car ascended, and the view outside turned pristine white, Liam hugged the thermos in his arms, filled with Caleb's favorite hot chocolate. The mountaintop cafe was almost empty. Liam chose a window seat, took out Caleb's sketch of a snow mountain, and placed it opposite him. Then he opened his notebook. "Dear Caleb, the snow here is as white as you drew it, but much colder than you imagined." The hot chocolate still tasted better on the hospital rooftop, probably because it lacked the seasoning of your sly smiles. "I tried building a snowman today in the style you love to draw, a round body and a crooked hat. Unfortunately, my skills are terrible, and it ended up looking like a melting marshmallow. I'll go to the desert in a couple of days. You always wanted to draw the stars there. Missing you, Liam." After writing, he carefully placed the sketchbook and notebook side by side on the table and took a photo. In the frame, Caleb's drawing and Liam's words merged wonderfully, as if they were truly traveling together. The desert night was bone-chillingly cold. Liam sat on a dune wrapped in a blanket, gazing at the vast expanse of stars. Caleb's sketchbook lay open on his lap, turned to the page with his drawing of the desert night sky. Caleb's brushstrokes were always so vivid, even capturing the movement of the Milky Way. Liam softly wondered which star was Caleb, his breath turning to white vapor that quickly vanished in the cold air. The wind whispered faintly across the dunes, like an answer. Liam took out his notebook and, by the light of his flashlight, continued to write. "Caleb, tonight's stars are brighter than any you drew on the hospital rooftop. I found Scorpio just as you taught me. You said the brightest star was Antares, the scorpion's heart. Now I believe every star is indeed a heart, because when I look up at the sky, I can clearly feel the pain in my chest. Tomorrow I'll fulfill your 9th wish. Good night." During his hospital recheck, Liam deliberately detoured to the room he and Caleb had shared. Pushing open the door, he found a stranger there, a young man with a slender back facing the window, a posture strikingly similar to Caleb's when they first met. Liam softly greeted him. The young man slowly turned, his eyes vacant. Liam noticed the patient wristband on his wrist. Acute myeloid leukemia, the same diagnosis as Liam's. The young man's voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in a long time, asking who Liam was. Liam approached, stating he was Liam, who used to live in this room. He saw a copy of hot chocolate on the 7th floor rooftop on the bedside table. Every story Liam wrote about Caleb was sent to patients in the hospital, and Nurse Miller had even bound them into a collection. The young man's gaze followed Liam's. He explained that a nurse had given it to him, saying it might help, but he grimaced, adding that seeing other people's happy stories only made him feel worse. Liam sat by his bed and took Caleb's sketchbook from his bag, asking if he wanted to see something different. The young man hesitantly took the book and opened the first page. Caleb's drawing of the hospital corridor, sunlight streaming through the windows, casting long bands of light on the floor. As he slowly turned the pages, Liam saw a gradual change in his eyes. He asked if these were all drawn by the Caleb from the book. Liam nodded, saying Caleb always believed one could find beauty even in the worst places. The young man gently touched Caleb's signature on the paper, then suddenly confessed that 3 days ago, he had almost jumped from the rooftop. Liam's heart lurched, recalling that life-changing afternoon on the rooftop. Liam asked what happened next. The young man looked up, his eyes no longer so vacant, saying he remembered a passage from the book. That death wasn't the bravest choice, but living was. Liam's eyes welled up. Those were Caleb's words to him. The young man extended his hand, introducing himself as Sam. Liam, taking his hand, felt as if he were holding his past self, and introduced himself as Liam, Caleb's partner. Sam looked at Liam, momentarily conflicted, then asked if Liam could send him more of their stories in the future. Liam, of course, agreed. After meeting Sam, Liam spent his days fulfilling the bucket list and visiting Sam in the hospital. Sam's condition varied each time. Liam would bring different sketchbooks, telling the stories behind each drawing. Sometimes they would simply sit quietly side by side, watching the clouds change shape outside the window, just as Liam and Caleb once did. 6 months later, Dr. Evans gave Liam surprising news. His latest test results showed his cancer cells were miraculously diminishing. Dr. Evans, pushing up his glasses, admitted they weren't sure why, but added that the experimental treatment research data Caleb participated in had indeed provided new insights for similar cases. Caleb's name, spoken by Dr. Evans, still brought a pang to Liam's heart, but this time, the pain was mixed with a warm sense of pride. Liam asked if Caleb knew before he passed away. Dr. Evans shook his head, explaining the data had only been analyzed recently, but he paused, adding he believed Caleb would have been very happy to continue helping Liam in this way. That night, Liam sat on the hospital rooftop, the place where he and Caleb first met, and wrote the longest letter yet. Dear Caleb, today Dr. Evans told me that the information you left behind might have saved my life. Doesn't that sound like your favorite kind of ironic joke? You taught me to love life through your death, and now you extend my life through your life. Sam asked about you today. I showed him your sketch of the beach, and he said he could feel the warmth of the sun in the drawing. I think he will get better just like me. Sometimes I wonder what we would be like if you were still here. Perhaps in a small apartment somewhere, you drawing, me writing. We'd argue over small things like whose turn it was to wash dishes, then make up on the rooftop. But then I understood you never truly left. You are in every sentence I write, in every landscape I see, even in the air I breathe. Because to love someone is to let them become a part of yourself. I promised you I would live well. That promise, I will fulfill with my entire life. Always yours, Liam. After writing, Liam looked up at the starry sky. The brightest star in the night sky suddenly twinkled, like a distant reply. The first spring after Caleb's death, Liam received a letter from a publishing house. They wanted to officially publish Hot Chocolate on the 7th floor rooftop. On the day he signed the contract, Liam brought a sample copy to the cemetery. Spring breeze rustled through the new grass, and a small bouquet of wildflowers lay on the gravestone. Liam placed the sample book on the gravestone, opening the title page, where their two names were printed side by side. He said their book was being published, and Sam wanted to be the first volunteer at the book signing. He was recovering well now. Liam's voice caught, and he reached out to brush a petal from the gravestone. He said he had visited their first beach yesterday. The waves still lapped the shore just as in Caleb's drawing. A little girl was building a sandcastle, reminding him of Caleb's desire to buy a small house by the sea. The wind suddenly picked up, rustling the book pages, finally stopping on the page with their photo. In the picture, Caleb's smile was forever captured in that 23-year-old summer. As Liam left the cemetery, he met Caleb's parents at the gate. They looked much older, but seeing the book in Liam's hand, Caleb's mother's eyes lit up. She softly said he would be very proud, touching the title on the cover. Liam nodded, his throat tight. Caleb's father took a small envelope from his pocket and handed it to Liam, saying they found it while sorting Caleb's belongings and thought Liam should have it. Inside the envelope was a folded piece of paper. When unfolded, it revealed Caleb's last unfinished drawing. Two white-haired elderly people sitting side by side on a bench by the ocean at sunset. In the corner, scribbled notes detailed the future they should have had, dated 3 days before Caleb's passing. Liam's tears finally broke, falling onto the blurred figures in the drawing. Caleb's mother gently hugged him. She smelled faintly of the same soap Caleb used. She whispered in his ear that Caleb lived in his heart, so this drawing could still become reality. Carrying Caleb's drawing and their book, Liam continued his journey to complete the list. In each new place, he would buy a copy of Hot Chocolate on the 7th floor rooftop from a local bookstore. Write every word Caleb had left him on the title page, and then leave it on a bench or coffee table. Until one rainy day, in a small coffee shop, as he was writing in a newly purchased book. A voice from across the table interrupted him, asking if it was his book, as he had just finished chapter 3. Liam looked up to see a stranger holding another copy of hot chocolate on the 7th floor rooftop. The man's eyes were slightly red. Liam, closing his book, confirmed it was his and also someone else's. The man hesitated, pointing to the name on the cover, asking if Liam was Liam. Liam nodded. Outside, raindrops slid down the glass, strikingly similar to that day on the hospital rooftop. The man introduced himself as Ethan, and sitting opposite Liam, said the book reminded him of many things. His fingers unconsciously stroked the pages. Liam noticed a faint ring mark on his left ring finger. Liam asked if he wanted to hear another version of the story, pushing the new book he had just written towards him. Ethan took the book and opened the title page. Caleb's handwriting read, "Even in the deepest night, remember to look up at the stars, because they are shining for you across time." Ethan's gaze softened, and he softly asked what happened next in their story. Liam looked out at the rain, then at Caleb's sketchbook on the table and smiled, saying it was still continuing.